In 2005, a police interrogation turned deadly when Esteban Carpio shot a detective and tried to escape by leaping from a third-story window. His arrest, bruised face in court, and life sentence ignited controversy that still lingers today. If you're interested in deep dives into true crime cases like this one, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's get into it. Esteban Carpio was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and grew up in a community where he faced many of the typical challenges that can influence a young man's path in life. His family had long-standing roots in the area, and by most accounts, his upbringing was relatively stable. However, like many young men in urban environments, Carpio had brushes with the law in his earlier years, often related to petty crimes and minor offenses. These incidents did not initially mark him as someone capable of violent acts, but they did hint at an underlying instability that would later become more pronounced. Carpio's family life seemed to be a source of both support and tension. His mother, known for being involved in his life, reportedly tried her best to keep him on the right track. But as Esteban entered adulthood, his behavior became more erratic, and it became clear to those around him that something was wrong. He began to struggle with mental health issues, which reportedly worsened in the years leading up to the events of 2005. There were warning signs. Carpio had begun exhibiting signs of paranoia and unpredictable behavior. While his family tried to intervene, it appears that mental health treatment was inconsistent, and he didn't receive the kind of sustained care he needed. By the time of the incident, Carpio had a history of mental instability, which his defense later claimed played a significant role in the tragic events that followed. Leading up to the fatal shooting, Carpio had already been involved in a series of troubling incidents. He had shown signs of desperation and had brushes with law enforcement, but it was his mental health struggles that would eventually become the core of his defense. His lawyers argued that Carpio was not in his right mind at the time of the interrogation, pointing to a history of untreated or insufficiently treated mental illness. However, this defense would ultimately fail to convince the jury. Despite these claims, the exact nature and extent of Carpio's mental health issues remained somewhat unclear, as they were never fully explored before the incident. What is clear, however, is that his increasingly unstable behavior, combined with a lack of adequate intervention, set the stage for the tragedy that was to come. His mental health would be a key factor throughout his trial, though it didn't change the course of the legal proceedings. On April 17, 2005, Esteban Carpio was brought to the Providence police station for questioning in connection with the stabbing of an elderly woman the previous day. The woman had been attacked in broad daylight, and police suspected Carpio's involvement. As part of the investigation, he was brought in by Detectives James Allen and Sergeant Carl Weston for an interrogation. Carpio had not been formally charged with the stabbing at the time, but he was considered a person of interest. Detective James Allen, a 27-year veteran of the Providence Police Department, was leading the interrogation. He was well respected within the force, known for his calm demeanor and professionalism. That day, the questioning took place in a third-floor interview room within the police headquarters. The room was small, standard for such interrogations, and only Detective Allen and Carpio were present when things took a violent turn. According to police reports, Carpio appeared cooperative at first, responding to questions, but the situation quickly escalated. At some point during the interrogation, Carpio became agitated. While the exact sequence of events remains unclear, what is known is that Carpio managed to overpower Detective Allen. In a sudden and shocking moment, Carpio wrested control of Detective Allen's service weapon, a standard-issue police handgun. It's believed that the detective was caught off guard, as he had not expected Carpio to become violent. Once he had control of the weapon, Carpio fired a single fatal shot at Detective Allen. The bullet struck Allen in the head, killing him almost instantly. The incident took place in a confined space, making the shot unavoidable for Allen. By all accounts, the murder was quick, brutal, and unexpected. Immediately after the shooting, Carpio attempted to escape the station. His actions in the moments following the shooting were frantic and desperate. He fled the interrogation room, leaving Detective Allen's body behind. Carpio's first move was to try to make his way out of the building. To do so, he approached a nearby window on the third floor of the police station. In a desperate attempt to evade capture, Carpio smashed the window and jumped out, falling 3 stories to the ground below. The fall caused significant injuries, but he survived. Carpio continued his escape on foot, though his injuries from the fall hindered him. Officers inside the station quickly realized something had gone terribly wrong when they found Detective Allen's lifeless body in the interrogation room. Within moments, a full-scale manhunt was launched. Carpio's escape didn't last long. He was apprehended just a few blocks from the police station after a brief pursuit. Despite his injuries, officers were able to subdue him and return him to police custody. The chaos and shock of the moment were palpable, both within the police department and the surrounding community. A well-respected detective had been killed in the line of duty, and Carpio was now the focus of a murder investigation. Back at the station, detectives were left to process the scene. The interrogation room had become a crime scene, and the nature of the shooting shocked both officers and the public. Detective Allen's death marked one of the darkest days in the history of the Providence Police Department, and the quick unraveling of events would soon become a focal point in the legal proceedings that followed. The entire sequence, from the interrogation to the shooting and the escape attempt, lasted only a few minutes, but its impact would be felt for years to come. After fatally shooting Detective James Allen in the interrogation room on April 17, 2005, Esteban Carpio made a desperate attempt to flee the scene. With the realization that he had just killed a police officer, his primary objective became escaping the confines of the Providence police station. This would not be an easy task, as the station was heavily guarded, and officers were stationed throughout the building. Immediately following the shooting, Carpio left the interrogation room in a state of panic. He quickly made his way to a nearby window on the third floor of the police station. In his desperation, Carpio smashed the window, breaking through the glass, and without hesitation leapt out into the open air. This was a last-ditch effort to evade arrest, knowing that there was no other obvious route of escape within the building. The fall from the third story was significant. 3 stories high, this distance was roughly 30 to 40 feet from the ground. Such a drop is dangerous and almost guaranteed to cause severe injury, especially given the solid surface below. As he fell, Carpio landed awkwardly on the pavement, causing immediate injuries upon impact. It was reported that he sustained fractures and other serious injuries from the fall, including damage to his legs and ankles, making it difficult for him to move quickly afterward. Despite these injuries, Carpio was determined to continue his escape. He managed to get to his feet and attempted to flee the scene on foot. His ability to continue moving after such a significant fall demonstrated his sheer desperation and survival instinct. However, the injuries he sustained from the jump slowed him down considerably, making it difficult for him to make much progress. Meanwhile, inside the police station, officers quickly became aware of what had happened. The gunshot that killed Detective Allen had been heard by officers nearby, and when they rushed to the interrogation room, they discovered the horrifying scene. Detective Allen was found unresponsive, having been fatally shot in the head, and Carpio was nowhere to be found. The discovery of the broken window on the third floor immediately alerted officers to Carpio's attempted escape. A full-scale manhunt was launched within moments. Officers quickly spread out across the area searching for Carpio. Given that the Providence police station was located in a central part of the city, there were multiple officers and resources available to track him down. Despite his injuries, Carpio was found just a few blocks away from the police station. His injuries from the fall had significantly slowed his movement, making it easier for officers to catch up to him. Within a matter of minutes, Carpio was apprehended by the police. He put up some resistance, but given his condition and the number of officers pursuing him, he was quickly subdued and placed under arrest. The officers on the scene were understandably shaken by the events that had just unfolded. They had lost a fellow officer, a respected veteran of the department, and were now tasked with ensuring Carpio was secured. The rapid apprehension of Carpio, combined with the chaos of the situation, left many officers in shock. Not only had they just witnessed the murder of one of their own, but they had also been involved in a violent chase to capture the suspect. Carpio was returned to the station in custody, where he was treated for his injuries before being processed. The escape attempt, while brief, was a pivotal moment in the case. It demonstrated the lengths Carpio was willing to go to in order to avoid being captured, even risking serious injury in the process. The officer's quick response in apprehending him, despite the confusion and shock of the situation, brought an immediate end to his escape and ensured that he would face justice for his actions. This entire sequence of events, from the shooting to his capture, unfolded in less than an hour, but its impact was felt deeply by the Providence Police Department and the wider community. Esteban Carpio's first court appearance took place shortly after his arrest for the murder of Detective James Allen. It was held on April 18, 2005, just one day after the incident. This initial hearing was meant to formally charge Carpio with first-degree murder, but it quickly became the center of a controversy that garnered widespread media attention and public outcry. When Carpio entered the courtroom, the focus immediately shifted to his physical appearance. He was brought in wearing a large, restrictive facial restraint mask, often referred to as a spit mask. The mask covered most of his face, leaving only his eyes visible. Designed to prevent suspects from spitting or biting, these masks are not uncommon in cases where a detainee is considered dangerous or combative. However, it was not the mask itself that sparked outrage, but the visible injuries on Carpio's face. Underneath the mask, Carpio's face was severely bruised and swollen. The extent of his injuries was immediately evident to those in attendance, raising questions about how they were sustained. The media captured images and video of Carpio, his swollen eyes peering through the mask, which were quickly broadcast to the public. These images ignited a firestorm of speculation, leading many to believe that Carpio had been beaten while in police custody. The court appearance quickly shifted from a routine procedural hearing to a larger debate about police brutality. Carpio's family, who were present at the hearing, were particularly vocal in their accusations. His mother, visibly emotional, cried out in court, claiming that her son had been brutalized by the police. These claims resonated with the public, who had seen the bruises and questioned whether excessive force had been used during Carpio's arrest or while he was in custody. In response to the allegations, the Providence Police Department provided an explanation for Carpio's injuries. According to police reports, the injuries were sustained during his escape attempt. After fatally shooting Detective Allen, Carpio had jumped from a third-story window at the police station in an attempt to flee. The fall resulted in multiple injuries, including facial bruising and fractures. Additionally, when officers apprehended him a short time later, there had been a physical struggle which could have contributed to his injuries. The police were quick to deny any allegations of misconduct or brutality. They insisted that the injuries were consistent with the fall and the arrest, not from any excessive force used after he was taken into custody. Despite this, the images of Carpio's swollen face and the visible restraint mask continued to fuel suspicions among the public, with many calling for an independent investigation into how he had been treated by police. The controversy was compounded by the dramatic nature of the case itself. A man accused of killing a veteran police detective, visibly injured in court and restrained in a way that many found unsettling. The juxtaposition of Carpio's crime with the questions surrounding his treatment while in custody created a media frenzy. News outlets across the country picked up the story, and debates about police conduct, the use of force, and the treatment of suspects in custody were reignited. Despite the outcry, no official investigation found evidence of police brutality in Carpio's case. Authorities stood by their explanation that the injuries were the result of Carpio's fall and the struggle during his arrest. Nonetheless, the images from that first court appearance left a lasting impression, becoming one of the defining moments of the case. It highlighted the tension between law enforcement and public perception, particularly in high-profile cases involving violent crime. The mask and Carpio's bruised face became symbolic of the broader debate about the limits of police power and the rights of suspects, even in cases as serious as murder. While the legal proceedings continued, with Carpio eventually being convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole, the controversy surrounding his first court appearance would remain a key part of the narrative surrounding the case. It raised difficult questions about the balance between ensuring public safety and protecting the rights of those accused of crimes, especially in emotionally charged situations like this one. Esteban Carpio's trial for the murder of Detective James Allen began in October 2006, over a year after the deadly incident at the Providence police station. The trial was highly anticipated, not only because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also because of the controversies that surrounded Carpio's arrest and first court appearance. The legal proceedings would focus on one central question: was Carpio mentally ill at the time of the shooting, and if so, to what extent should that affect his culpability for the crime? The prosecution built its case around the charge of first-degree murder. To secure a conviction, they needed to prove that Carpio had acted with premeditation and intent when he fatally shot Detective Allen. The prosecution's argument was straightforward. Carpio, while being questioned about an unrelated stabbing, overpowered Detective Allen, seized his service weapon, and shot him point-blank in the head. They argued that Carpio's actions were deliberate, pointing to his immediate escape attempt as evidence of his awareness of the gravity of his actions. The prosecution framed the murder as cold-blooded, emphasizing the brutality of the killing and Carpio's clear intent to avoid being captured. Key pieces of evidence were presented to bolster the prosecution's case, including forensic analysis of the weapon, eyewitness testimony from other officers in the building, and detailed accounts of the timeline leading up to and following the shooting. The prosecution argued that Carpio's calculated behavior, grabbing the gun, firing the fatal shot, and immediately attempting to escape by jumping from a third-story window, demonstrated a clear intent to kill and evade arrest. This argument would be crucial in establishing the element of premeditation necessary for a first-degree murder conviction. On the other side, the defense centered its case on Carpio's mental state at the time of the incident. Carpio's attorneys argued that he was suffering from severe mental illness, specifically paranoid schizophrenia, which impaired his ability to distinguish right from wrong. They claimed that Carpio was in the throes of a psychotic episode during the interrogation, and that his actions were driven by irrational fears and delusions, not a conscious decision to commit murder. The defense called upon mental health experts who testified to Carpio's long history of mental illness, which had allegedly gone untreated in the years leading up to the shooting. The defense argued that because Carpio's mental illness clouded his judgment, he should not be held fully responsible for his actions under the law. They sought to reduce the charge from first-degree murder to a lesser charge, such as second-degree murder or manslaughter, which would carry a significantly lighter sentence. Their goal was to convince the jury that Carpio's mental condition at the time of the shooting made it impossible for him to form the intent necessary for a first-degree murder conviction. Despite these arguments, the prosecution successfully countered the defense's claims of mental illness. While acknowledging that Carpio had a history of mental health issues, the prosecution contended that his actions on the day of the murder demonstrated that he was fully aware of what he was doing. They pointed to his calculated escape attempt and his refusal to cooperate with police following his capture as evidence of a man who knew he had committed a crime and was trying to avoid the consequences. The prosecution also called their own mental health experts, who argued that while Carpio may have had mental health problems, they were not severe enough to absolve him of responsibility for the murder. The jury ultimately sided with the prosecution. After deliberating for several days, they rejected the defense's argument that Carpio's mental illness excused or mitigated his actions. The jury found that Carpio had acted with intent and premeditation when he shot Detective Allen. As a result, Carpio was convicted of first-degree murder. At his sentencing, Carpio showed little emotion. The judge handed down the maximum sentence, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. This meant that Carpio would spend the rest of his life behind bars with no opportunity for release. The sentencing was met with mixed reactions. The Providence Police Department and the family of Detective Allen expressed relief that justice had been served, while Carpio's family and supporters continued to insist that he had not received a fair trial due to the rejection of his mental illness defense. The trial and subsequent conviction of Esteban Carpio closed a chapter on one of the most tragic and controversial cases in Providence's recent history. While the legal proceedings resolved the immediate questions of guilt and punishment, the debates surrounding Carpio's mental health and the treatment of suspects in police custody would linger long after the final verdict. In the end, Carpio's conviction for the murder of Detective James Allen ensured that he would spend the rest of his life in prison without the chance of parole, sealing his fate within the Rhode Island criminal justice system. The Esteban Carpio case had a profound impact on the community in Providence, Rhode Island. The murder of Detective James Allen, a well-respected and long-serving member of the police force, shocked the city and left many in mourning. Detective Allen had built a strong reputation over his 27 years of service, and his sudden and violent death left the police department and the broader community grappling with the tragedy. His funeral was a somber affair attended by hundreds of fellow officers, family, and community members who were deeply affected by his loss. For many, it was a reminder of the risks that law enforcement officers face daily. However, the case quickly became more than just about the murder. Carpio's first court appearance, where he was seen wearing a facial restraint mask with visible injuries, shifted public attention from the crime to concerns about potential police misconduct. The images of Carpio, bruised and swollen under the mask, were broadcast widely, sparking immediate outrage and suspicion. For some, the mask and Carpio's injuries symbolized a misuse of police power. These images fueled allegations of police brutality, particularly from Carpio's family, who accused the police of beating him after his arrest. The Providence community, already shaken by the murder of a detective, now found itself divided. On one side were those who saw Carpio as a violent criminal whose actions had led to the tragic death of a beloved officer. On the other, there were individuals and groups concerned about Carpio's treatment in custody and the possibility that excessive force had been used against him. The racial dynamics of the case, with Carpio being a black man and Detective Allen a white officer, added another layer of tension to the conversation. The media's coverage of the case only intensified these divisions. Local and national news outlets quickly picked up on the controversy surrounding Carpio's injuries and the restraint mask. Headlines questioned whether Carpio had been mistreated by the police, and the images from the courtroom became a focal point in many reports. Reporters interviewed Carpio's family, who continued to assert that the injuries were the result of police violence, and this narrative gained traction in certain parts of the community. Meanwhile, the police department maintained that Carpio's injuries were the result of his jump from a third-story window in his attempt to escape and the subsequent struggle during his arrest. The department stood by its officers, denying any wrongdoing, but the media's focus on the brutality allegations created a sense of doubt for some. This tension between the official police narrative and the allegations of misconduct created a media frenzy, with various news outlets offering differing perspectives on the case. As the trial progressed, the media remained heavily involved, reporting on the court proceedings and continuing to highlight the divide in public opinion. While some outlets focused on the facts of the case and the prosecution's efforts to secure a first-degree murder conviction, others emphasized the defense's claims of mental illness and the brutality allegations. This dual narrative left the public torn between sympathy for the slain officer and concern over the treatment of Carpio. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to see more in-depth true crime content, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. Thanks for watching.